This episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast is brought to you by BetUS.
Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? Jesus. It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. I'm currently joined at the moment by part of Andrew Claudio, filling in for Jeremy Cohen, who's on vacation this week. Andrew, I can't see your mouth. I wonder if I have the ability to hear you.
Congrats, Jalen. Well deserved.
Jesus Christ. Not only do I hope this bit is still relevant and fresh when this episode airs. We should say we're recording this on Thursday night. But I hope it stands the test of time. And I hope specifically that photo of OG Anunoby from the Jalen Brunson the video of his teammates, which aired, I guess, during his captain acceptance ceremony. I don't know what the hell we're calling this thing.
It's coronation.
Coronation. Yeah, it's Coronation Day. Someone who has seen the movie Frozen approximately 157 times. OG Anunoby, man. He is a real one, as they say.
A one of one, might even say. Yes.
Listen,
Thank you, OG Anunoby, for... I cannot wait for the pod he does with Josh and Jalen, and hopefully it's one they ask good questions. But I look forward to getting to know this man and his personality, if he has one.
I don't care if he is an AI generated entity, from Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. I don't care if he is the human form of that. If he could just stay healthy for, I don't even need to put a regular season number on it. Just stay healthy for all the playoff games. That's all I ask.
That is a reference to Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning AI. That is, for people who didn't watch it, they fought the internet, is what they did in the most recent Mission Impossible movie.
If you're listening to this and you did not see Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, you should pause the pod and go pay whatever American dollars it costs you to see that movie on stream. No, really what you should do is you should go find a time machine and go back and see it in a theater the way God and Tom Cruise, who may or may not be two different people, intended it to be seen. That is what you should do.
We've talked about this movie before. I was lukewarm. Just part ones of two are always difficult because the story's not finished.
So much fun.
It was fun. I didn't say it wasn't fun. So Twisters was fun. I would put them about the same level of fun.
I could have seen Twisters. We're getting off track. I could have seen Twisters in the. I went out this is what kind of sicko I am. Everybody was beat after a long day, I think at Disneyland, and the opportunity was there for me to go out and see a movie by myself. I got Dolores' blessing. Kids were in bed, ready to fall asleep, and I had the choice to go see either. I actually had three choices: Twisters, Quiet Place Day 1, or Longlegs. And I chose Longlegs because I had heard that seemed to be the most interesting of the three movies, even though I have a feeling in retrospect I would have enjoyed probably Quiet Place Day 1 the most. I still haven't seen it, but the reviews are most positive. But I'm happy I saw Longlegs because that was weird as all hell.
It required you to think more, I'll tell you that much, than Twisters or Quiet Place Day 1. There's no fun in Quiet Place Day 1 either. It's very sad.
See, I like that. But I love any kind of creature movie. Okay, we're getting wildly off topic. We have a pod to do today, an important pod. So we did an episode a couple months ago, I guess now, in which we piggybacked / stole a concept from my favorite podcast, The Big Picture, on the Ringer Podcast Network, in which they do Hall of Fame episodes for notable individuals. And they go through the person's career. They just did one for Sidney Lumet, which was very good. And they pick 10 representative items from the person's career. Usually they do it with movies, but they've done some other stuff. So we did it for the Knicks 2023-24 season. We had a lot of fun, got in some good debates and arguments. We're bringing the concept back. So shout out again, Big Picture. We're doing it for Jalen Brunson. because Jalen Brunson was just named the 36th captain in the history of the New York Knicks franchise. I did pitch an alternative option for this episode to Andrew Claudio, which he shot down so fast, in which I pitched, hey, let's rank the 36 captains in Knicks history. And you were just, nope, did not entertain it.
I think it's a fitting tribute to our captain that we do his Hall of Fame and not go through the list of Knicks captains and show how insignificant this designation could potentially be.
How long do you think we'd be able to make a Lance Thomas Hall of Fame episode?
It'd be a YouTube short.
The funny thing is, for some of the he wasn't to me, he was not like the most dispiriting name on the list because what he lacked in basketball ability, he made up for in, I guess, certain leadership qualities. Yeah. Some of the other names that really threw people for a loop, you could find 10 good / important-ish Eddie Curry games. I think the one that I probably would have struggled with the most was Steve Francis. Steve Francis had one moment that saw him hop on the scorer's table when he beat the Wizards to tie the Knicks for 8th for like a day. Other than that, I don't know that he had a single positive moment in wearing the Knicks uniform.
You could have told me that was his last game as a Knick, and I would have believed you. I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything else from his Knicks career. I have more. I gotta be honest. I have more Cam Reddish memories than I do Steve Francis. I have more Jericho Sims memories. As honestly hasn't played a game yet. I have more campaign memories as a New York Knick than I do Steve Francis.
Here's a question for you. How many games did Steve Francis play after leaving the New York Knicks franchise?
15, 20, 0?
If you had asked me the question, I would have probably just ballparked it at 100, maybe more. 10.
All right. I knew he came at the very end of his career. I knew that. I just didn't know it was how that was that. I was that close with 15, 20.
Yeah, so I guess he got voted captain for the 2006-2007 season. He played 44 games for the Knicks that year. Those games did not go terribly well. Okay, that's enough Steve Francis talk. Let's talk about Jalen Brunson. Second round draft pick. The 30. I always get this wrong. 34th pick in the draft. 33rd pick in the draft. 33rd pick in the draft of the Dallas Mavericks, of course. Knicks had a chance to draft him.
They did.
I guess with the 8th pick, right? They would have needed to select him a little higher than he was projected to go.
He got drafted right before Mitch, right?
Mitch was 34 or 30. I always forget it. 34, 35, 36, something like that.
Yeah, so it's not. He was the 9th pick. That's the Kevin Knox draft.
Knox was 9. I always forget between Knox and Frank. One was 8, one was 9.
So Ntilikina's. Hold on. Ntilikina's 9. Ntilikina's 8.
Ntilikina's 8. I'm looking at it now. Knox was 9.
Dennis Smith Jr. was 9.
Yeah, and Mitch was.
Then Donovan Mitchell was 11.
Mitch was 36. Jalen Brunson was 33. Also, reportedly, had an opportunity to trade for Jalen Brunson on draft night 2 years later, when the Knicks selected Obi Toppin. I believe the Mavs had a hankering to move up to select Tyrese Halliburton and offered their, I don't know what their pick was, but their pick plus Jalen Brunson to move up. So better late than never. Arrived to the Knicks 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago now, and it's been mostly smooth sailing and onwards and upwards ever since. For this Hall of Fame, I'm assuming we are only choosing from moments from his Knick tenure.
Yes, of course. Yes, okay. Of course. Dallas had the 18th pick, by the way. They could have so the Knicks could have drafted Brunson, would have had 18.
Wait, what are you talking about?
You're talking about that the Mavericks tried the Toppin draft?
So in 2020, when they tried to trade up for Toppin, yes, the Mavs had the 18th pick, which they used to select Josh Green.
Right, but it's 3 spots ahead of Maxey. So maybe they would have looked at well, I guess with Brunson, they probably don't take Maxey. So what's funny is maybe they take Precious Achiuwa.
I actually
What? And Maxey, what do you think? Maxey becomes the quickly?
Fascinating. What if they would have come out of that draft night with Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Brunson instead of Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly? Wow. Talk about a
big what if?
That's a massive what if.
Yeah.
And does either of those players actually, no, we know the answer to that. Oh, wait, no. I was going to say, do either of those players start the next season?
Brunson starts.
Leon Rose was the president, so yeah, Brunson would have gotten the start.
Brunson would have started.
Yeah.
And then there's no conversation about Obi versus Julius, and is Julius about to get traded because Obi's
not there? There's no
Alfred
Payton.
Right.
None of that. That would have been an interesting team. Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle 2 years before it happened with RJ. RJ would have been there.
And instead of Quickly, maybe they take a chance on a taller or bigger player, like a wing named Jaden McDaniels.
Well, no, because what you're referencing is the Knicks still had the later pick. They still had 23. So maybe with 23, they could have, they could have taken Jaden McDaniels there. But to come out, I was going to say Peyton Pritchard because Peyton Pritchard was the other guy that Worldwide West allegedly had a hankering for. But to come out of, I don't think you need 3 point guards coming out of the draft. That's interesting. Who they would have. Man, it would have been nice if they took Jaden McDaniels or Desmond Bane.
I was staring at Des Bane, friend of the pod. Yeah,
that would have talk about a home run draft night.
And we all would have been fine with it because, like, all right, rebuilding team. They traded 1 pick to get a player and another pick. Like,
I wonder where Quickly would have gone. All right, we'll do that. Flush out that what if another day. So, I my only thing is I think for this Hall of Fame, we should not limit ourselves to games. We should open it up to events / honors. Yeah, well, you're looking at me like I have 10 heads. So for like right off the bat, can you build a Jalen Brunson Knicks Hall of Fame today, 2 years into his career, without including him signing with the franchise to begin with? Should that not go in his Hall of Fame?
I don't think that honors the exercise. I think the whole point of this is to pick the 10 games. Like,
you think 10 games?
You did not listen to a Sidney Lumet or a Tom Hanks podcast and be like, married Rita Wilson. Like, there was never the day he won an Oscar. Like, it was never a moment's draft. This Hall of Fame is his resume.
Yes, but an Oscar nomination for a film may nudge the film into the Hall of Fame, although oftentimes it actually doesn't when they do it.
So part of the moment, like I'm sure the Indiana game this year is going to come up. Part of what made that moment great wasn't just that the Knicks won and Jalen was awesome. It was the day he became an all-star for the first time. So that elevates the moment, the accomplishment. That's why it's why, honestly, not to relitigate this, but it's why the Bulls game meant so much to me when we did the Knicks 2023-24 season.
It represented 50 wins.
It represented 50 wins, the 2 seed, like running through the tape, all of it. That elevated the moment for me. I'm watching before the ceremony today, the coronation, they replayed Game 6 on MSG. And I'm watching the end of it, and I'm watching Josh Hart's interview, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not surprised teams were ducking them." And I missed that moment of Josh Hart saying that because he clearly was like, "Look at all you ran scared, and we knocked them out in 6." Like, I'm not surprised. And I go back to the moment that everyone ran scared. Shout out to the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Milwaukee Bucks and all these other teams that were sitting good players, and we're playing Dante DiVincenzo 53 minutes in game 82 to get the 2 seed. So I've never been more proud of a team than after a very poorly played basketball game. But what it symbolized,
that was a poorly played basketball game. I co-sign that.
Was them finishing the regular season journey.
Okay.
So that's how I think you take the moment and you elevate the game.
For sure. No disagreement. On that note, we are not going to go through 164 regular season games plus 24 playoff games.
Correct. And
24.
Yes, we are.
We're not going to go through every single one of them.
No, just the wins. Just to get. Well, no, we should, because I'm sure you played well in losses too.
Yeah, there's some, but we'll both gonna go through basically the game logs. We're gonna scan them at the same time, and I'll call out the ones that I think are deserving of at least even a short conversation. If I skip anything, please let me know. You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. Jalen Brunson's first game as a Knick, the overtime loss to Memphis. He didn't play particularly well. Jalen Brunson,
7 of 18 from the field. Yeah, what I remember about that game is Julius was good, and Cam Reddish had a shot to send the game to overtime.
I remember Cam Reddish was my 3-star player of the game in the newsletter. I remember Isaiah Hartenstein played a ton of minutes that he would not approach that many minutes again for like 3 months or more, or maybe even actually he might not have approached that amount of minutes the entire season. Now that I think about it, because Mitch was in foul trouble. And yes, of course, the Cam Reddish 3. Okay. His first win as a Knick over a 24-point victory over the Detroit Pistons, 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting. I don't remember a single thing about this game. No.
We're getting close to the game I remember. We're getting there.
It is the first game you remember. He 27-13 against the Charlotte Hornets, a 3-point win?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What do you remember?
Game went into overtime. He had a big 3 when they were trailing late. I also remember seeing the blueprint come into play, that option A was Brunson. And as a result of a double team, he dumped it off. One of his 13 assists in overtime was a dump to Julius, getting downhill within one-on-one because Jalen attracted the double team. It was like, oh, that could be a thing if he's hitting people going downhill. And what we've seen for the last 2 years is when he executes some court vision, he hits people that cut. He hits people that roll. Hartenstein made a living off of those short roll shots. Well, it was really the floater, but like sometimes he'd even get a dunk out of it. So there's multiple plays in overtime, but that was the first time I was like, oh, we have an alpha. You know, Julius was like an underqualified alpha during that 4-seed season, and it ran out of gas in the playoffs. And now this Brunson thing could become, pretty special if it reaches its ceiling. So that's what I remember about that Charlotte game.
The shot you're referencing, by the way, with 1:35 seconds left, the Knicks were down by 3 to, again, this was not supposed to be a good Hornets team. And Brunson, I remember the shot in my mind's eye, made it 3 to tie the game at 120. And yes, it did eventually go into overtime. After that, both teams scored. And yeah, also made a 3-pointer to start the scoring in overtime. We should note. And then made a couple of other shots. He was very good down the stretch in that game. Okay, I'm going to yellow that one. So for anybody who missed the last episode, greens automatically in, yellows go back and reconsider, reds are out. Okay, the next game that I think warrants consideration, I'm kind of skipping over a big swath of games here. If I've missed something, please do let me know. Would be a win at Oklahoma City, the last game of a 5-game road trip that brought the Knicks to, I actually should have the record up here. I think it brought them back to 500. I'm going to double check that right now. Do you recall the game that I am talking about?
So what I remember about the game is we were in the early stages of playback, and it was when we discovered that you hate fun.
I mean, there are a lot of times.
I'm just saying there was music being played in between timeouts, and you were saying how much you hated this silliness. And I was like, they're playing music, like there's cheerleaders, and you just were like, I hate it. It's awful. There's a basketball game. They're entertained enough, and it's like you really just want them to you want it to be a timeout, like they go turn the lights off and think about what they did during the timeout, and. That's all I remember. I remember the Knicks won, but it wasn't necessarily a special Jalen Brunson game.
Okay. The reason I bring it up,
film school game.
The reason I bring it up is because he had 30 points in a game for the first time in his Knicks career, scored 34 and 9, shot 14 of 20 from the field, only 1 of 6 from deep. First 30-point game, should we yellow it? Should we just move past it? I don't think this is going
past it. The biggest thing about that road trip, that was a very crucial, they had benched Fournier at the beginning of the road trip.
Yeah, the Utah and the Denver. Yes.
That's a Julius Randle road trip, which is why when we do a Randle Hall of Fame, these games will come up again.
The Randle Hall of Fame, my God, that's going to be a bear. But the Denver game when he dove on the floor in the second half, that is a Julius game that will stand out for me for a very, very long time. Okay. They followed up that win with 3 losses in their next 4 games, which brought them to a home game against the Dallas Mavericks. They went into that game with a record of 10 and 12. They led that game by 15, I think was their biggest lead in the first half. And then put forth over the final 30-ish minutes one of the most putrid displays of basketball that I've ever seen a team play or put forth in my life. I remember that game, or remember the feeling of watching that game like it was yesterday, and certainly remember how I felt delivering the post game afterwards. And didn't see it live, but heard it after I was done with the post game, where Jalen Brunson said, "This is not on the coach, who was going to get fired any day at that point, but this is on us. We got to fix it." It's not going in the Hall of Fame, but I did at least want to mention that press conference, because that always will stick out to me as the moment that things became what they are now.
You can yellow it if you want. I doubt it makes it at the end. I recognize the moment.
If we're not putting in moments, even if we were putting in moments, I'm not sure if that was getting in, but if we're not putting in moments, like, we're certainly not putting in the game. So if we're not putting in moments, then that's not going in.
Okay. Look, it is a turning point. You're correct. That
is the turning point.
The sliding doors moment, if they fired Tibbs the next day, is a big what if.
That preceded 8 straight wins. Brunson actually had a couple of duds early on during that winning streak. Went 2 for 14 versus the Hawks in a blowout win, and then a big win against Charlotte. Went 3 for 13. Nothing during that winning streak was particularly notable from him. He had another 30-point game against the Bulls, first of 2 back-to-back wins in Chicago. Again, can't say I remember much from that game.
You're missing. So
yes,
game 2. The first game, I believe, that was the overtime game. No, the second game was the overtime game. Which one was the overtime game?
The first game was the overtime game because it was an 8-point win.
Okay.
The second win was by 23.
They blew a lead late and went ISO Randle down the stretch. Speaking of things
I remember that
you may not remember, to much consternation from the fan base, like, these ISO Randle plays with games on the line need to end.
I remember that.
And the Randle misses.
It was a terrible possession, right?
It was a terrible possession. I believe it was a shot clock violation, and the clock expired. Like, he didn't even get a shot off.
It might have been.
And then they go into overtime, and shout out Alex Caruso, an iconic crossing of ankles.
Was that
into
in
a
overtime?
3-pointer. That was in overtime, because it put them up by 8 for good. And it was like, oh, we have one of those now. Okay,
so that should go yellow.
That's fine. One of the first moments I remember of Jalen Brunson was him making Elmer Fudd look silly. One of the best defenders in the sport look very silly.
That's a good call. See, this is why I need you for this stuff, because you have this freaking memory.
That's why I'm here. You go.
That's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so that we're gonna yellow that. Another 30-point game during that win streak came against the Pacers, a 3-point win. It was their second to last win of that win streak. Again, 30 points on 11 of 22 shooting, perfect from the field. And I don't think this is going in. No. Okay. So they have one more huge win against the Warriors at home. I think that was an injury depleted Warriors team, if I recall correctly.
No, very healthy one. Just a very bad one that came in. Oh no, Steph didn't play.
Yeah.
So what I remember about that game was that it was on TNT, and they spent an entire portion of the broadcast interviewing Steph on the bench. and the Knicks turned a 10-point lead into a 25-point lead, and Steve Kerr called timeout. And it was like, we were on playback, like, so we just spent that entire portion of the basketball game watching the Knicks go up by 15 or up by 25, and all we heard was, how's Steph Curry doing? So, yeah.
So we're about to go through the first half of his first season and not have an automatic entry because he misses 3 games. First of all, after the Warriors win, there's 3 straight losses. Then there's 2 more consecutive losses. First, those 2 that Brunson didn't play, one of which was the Dallas game. Again, a game I'll never forget, but Brunson didn't play in that game. They won a game against Houston without Brunson. Brunson comes back, and then they start to right the ship. 6 wins in 7 games. We have a 38-pointer against the Spurs. Can't say I remember that too much. What I do remember is the one loss in there was Brunson putting up 44 against the Milwaukee Bucks in a 4-point loss in early January. Again, it's his first 40-point game as a Knick. It would wind up being. It's funny, we talk about like 40-point games like they're nothing for Brunson now, especially after the playoffs that we just saw. At the moment when that happened, I remember being like, 44 is a big fucking deal.
The problem with it, do you remember how the game ended?
Not in distinguishing fashion for Brunson, if I recall.
So I got to double check that this is the game I'm thinking of.
I'll double check it with you right now.
Well, so there are 2 Bucks games that year that were both at the Garden, and both times we were like, just keep it close and I'll be happy. And
the Christmas game, that was the Sixers. I'm getting my games confused.
It was very much just keep it close and I'll be happy. And then down the stretch of one, Brunson had a chance to hit 2 free throws to go up 1.
That was not this game.
That's not this game. You could yellow it then if you'd like.
So
it's
this
a losing
game,
effort, but it is a loss nonetheless.
I'm looking at it right now. Brunson scored the last.
I remember this game, but keep going. I remember what happened this game. The flow of it now.
Scored the last 10 points of the game, and it was 10 points in a minute and a half. They were trailing the whole time. And like nothing, they never were able to take the lead. But like some of those points came where like the game was kind of already like decided, but he got 44 on Milwaukee, which was like a big deal. Yeah. I don't know if this is going to wind up being a green. It might be the strongest yellow for me thus far. So we'll yellow it and we'll come back to it.
So look at the score in the third quarter.
The score in the third quarter of that game. The Knicks were up
by 17.
They were up by, I have it as 16. Yeah.
Yeah. 70-53. That's 17.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Randall hits 2 free throws. They're up 17. And so what I remember is a flurry of threes late in the third quarter cuts the lead down to 5. And because like they hit on 4 straight possessions, and the Knicks, part of not necessarily a hole in their defense, but because of the way that they play, they had a man in the paint at all times.
Yeah. Okay.
And Fournier just kept getting beat in that corner 3, and the Bucks just took advantage of it on 4 straight threes. This is part of the Tibbs math that he plays, that the math went against him. They now have the best wing defenders in the league on their team, so they can play whatever defense they want.
Things have changed.
But in this particular game, the 3-point barrage destroyed them at the end of the third and erased the 17-point lead down to 5. And then in the fourth quarter, they blew it. So I remember leaving that game feeling very frustrated that they blew the lead, but also very happy about Brunson. We could put it on there. It's first 40-point game. We will have others that we can point to as important moments.
But again, that was the 41st game. It was Brunson's 38th game of his first year as a Knick, but it was the Knicks' 41st game that year. So halfway through the season, we don't have a green yet. Quick break to tell you about our new friends from BetUS. Are you looking for a new book this basketball season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest payouts in the industry. 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, 200% crypto deposit bonus, fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Check out my BetUS link in the description below. 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year, live wagering on all major games, best betting variety in the business. Get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And did you know that BetUS can give you your very own personal account manager? Hey, Andrew.
Hey, John.
What do you think about going through an NBA award and making a pick, me and you?
Let's do it. How about MVP?
I like MVP, especially because Jalen Brunson is definitely going to win it, if only. So looking at the odds that I am seeing in front of us, I got to tell you, I feel a little bit like I'm betraying Knicks fans everywhere, but I kind of like Anthony Edwards at plus 1,200 because I think the Timberwolves could do very well in the West, and I think he has another little bit of a leap left in him.
It's cheating to say that Giannis at plus 700 is a great bet. It's a former 2-time MVP that is giving you 7-1 odds. So I like that bet. We slander his name, but Joel Embiid at 7-1 is good money.
Ooh.
I do like your call at plus 1,200 for Anthony Edwards. Our beloved Jalen Brunson has the same as Jason Tatum at plus 2,000. I think that's if this was a first team All NBA odds, I'd like both. I unfortunately have to pass on both. The one I'm interested in, John, as far as a money value, we've talked about this a lot on our Patreon pod lately, but Victor Wembanyama is plus 2,000.
Ooh.
And I do think one day he's going to win not one, not two, not three, but multiple MVPs in this league. And if you're thinking the clock starts sooner rather than later, maybe a breakout Wemby second season that gives you, I mean, look, parlay this with, we'll go over most improved player odds in the future, but plus 2,000 is just a good value play. And who knows, maybe the Spurs are like the 3 seed with, 40 games left and suddenly his odds are much better and you can recalculate. But yeah, Wemby at plus 2,000, then I do like your Anthony Edwards plus 1,200 bet.
And of course, no bet on any Knick is a bad bet, if only for morale. So Jalen Brunson staring right there for you. Thank you, Andrew, for your thoughts on that. One more time, use the link in the description and get 125% deposit bonus up to $2,000 for your first 3 deposits. After that, 3 straight wins, a couple of 30-pointers for Brunson. Again, none that I think rise to the level of going in here. Then they have a 4-game losing streak, starting with the game against Toronto, where RJ hit the buzzer-beating dunk to send it to overtime. Alas, they lost that game and then proceeded to lose 4 straight after that to the Wizards, Hawks, and another one to the Raptors. Yeesh. From there, this is the for me, this is the game their season turned around. Even though that they had a good record going into the game, so the Cavs game on January 24th, they won the game on an Isaiah Hartenstein big time defensive play on Donovan Mitchell at the very end. Big time play. That win brought they were only 25-23 heading into that game. The team was barely above 500 going into that. Big win, really started a cavalcade of like, that was the joke that season. Oh, this is the biggest win of the year. Oh no, this is the biggest win of the year. And we started piling them up because we hadn't really had a signature win before that, and then we got a bunch. Brunson wasn't good in that game. He was 5-13, scored 14 points. So it's not going in either. Next game at Boston, this was not the Emmanuel Quickley game because Jalen Brunson didn't play in the Emmanuel Quickley game. But he had a good game. They won in the Boston Garden, 29 points. Again, though, is this rising to the level of going in?
Two things. First of all, you got to stop calling it that. It's not the Garden. It's not the Boston Garden. It's
What did I say? I
Toronto
said
Dominion. You said Boston Garden. You do it out of respect because you are.
What is it?
It's the Toronto Dominion Bank North Arena.
I'm not calling it that.
It's not the Garden because we then.
I would never call it the Garden. I said the Boston Garden.
It's not that either. They tore down the Boston Garden. Now it's just TD Bank Garden.
I will never remember to do that.
Call it a flower patch for all I care.
I'll just say in Boston. Garden. If that would appease you, I'll say in Boston.
It would. Okay. There's one garden. And it's on 33rd and 7th. Okay.
Yes, I don't disagree.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? Or just that
this
was
a Randall game? This is a Randall game. He had 37. I think this clinched him the
All-Star
nod too, because it was on TNT. It's also Benji came up with the term, so I'll give him credit here, but this was also a prevent offense game where the Knicks were running out the clock down the stretch and they blew a 10-point lead in the last 3 minutes.
That was infuriating.
Largely with Jalen Brunson having the ball.
It was not good. It was bad. Yeah. Follow that up with a loss to Brooklyn. Follow that up with a loss to the Lakers. Brunson had 37, lost to the Lakers. Missed the next game against the Heat. I frankly don't remember why. They eked it out. And then another 40-pointer, this time against the Clippers. But again, it came in a loss.
Do you remember how they lost that game to the Clippers?
No, but you'll tell me.
So the inverse of what happened with the Celtic game was the Knicks actually made this really great comeback down the stretch. And the Clippers between Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were playing prevent offense. Knicks hit a huge three with Quentin Grimes.
God damn it.
And unfortunately, the Clippers, it was on an offensive rebound that just went long too. And Hartenstein, the ball bounces out to Batum. Hartenstein pulls up rather than closing out. Batum hits a three, sends it into overtime, and the Knicks lose.
Yeah, that was very frustrating. That was a heartbreaker.
I have a theory, by the way, because something's about to happen to the Knicks season.
What is your Brunson? By the way, had 9 points in the fourth quarter. There, he was part of that comeback. But what is your theory?
41 points on 19 shots. I believe this is the game that convinced them they need to go get Josh Hart. Because that rebound at the end of the game changes everything. And RJ played 40-something minutes in this game, or 38-something minutes in this game. It was awful. And it was like, he needs a wing. And that he then, what ended up happening is RJ was then replaced by Josh Hart in a lot of closing lineups down the stretch. So then they traded for Josh Hart 5 days later.
I'm not even going to yellow that because I know it's not going in. The next one, I believe, is the Fournier game. It was a win against the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, matinee. Oh, not a matinee. It was a Sunday afternoon game. That's right, Sunday afternoon game. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we got a win against the Magic, loss against the Sixers. Brunson goes for 30. And now we have back-to-back big scoring games for him. He had 38 against the Utah Jazz and 40 against the Nets.
Who's now on the team?
Josh Hart's. So Utah game was Josh Hart's first game. Brunson scores 38 and then fouls that up with a big effort against Brooklyn. Big scoring games. Neither of them really stand out in my mind, though.
Not from a moment or a performance standpoint. The Utah game's the Josh Hart game.
Yes,
so that's why it's probably not a Brunson. But this is the moment the University of Villanova started to become very important, at least in my life.
He had one more big game scoring wise in this. This was what ended up being a 9-game winning streak. And that was a 39-point game, again, at the expense of the sad sack Brooklyn Nets. He, of course, did not play in the 9th win of that 9-game winning streak. That was the Emmanuel Quickly game at the TD fucking...
Literally any words you say in this sentence are fine except Garden.
Except the TD Center.
There you go. I like it. The TD Center.
That is the first of... So now he starts missing games. He misses the next game against the Hornets, comes back, plays only 19 minutes against the Kings at Sacramento. They lose that game. And then he misses 3 more in a row, comes back, and then So again, this is insane. We're now 72 Knick games into this season. If there is a quote unquote best win of the year, given the traditional definition of a great win, this would probably be it. It's the Denver game, which they won at the Garden. Brunson was fine. He was good. That was a Mitch game.
Is a Mitchell Robinson game. That was that felt like a Big 15 game too, where everybody had a moment. I believe the final 6 points to clinch the win was like a Brunson shot, a Randall shot, a Mitch dunk, and some defense played in between. It wasn't a standout Brunson game. We're getting to it though.
There is a highlight color green coming soon. Not these two games, though. The next two games he plays before he misses, and again, another 2 straight. Wolves and at the Heat. The Heat game, of course, is when he got injured. And the game before that against the Wolves was the Julius Randle 57-pointer.
57-point game. This was a trend that season, that anytime one Knick had a great game, they'd lose, which is why the game we're about to mention is most significant.
So he comes back, misses a win against Houston, comes back against Miami at home. That was they win against Miami at home. That essentially more or less clinched them a playoff berth, which that was big. Brunson had a fairly pedestrian game, and notably did not play in the fourth quarter. That was the most significant thing about that game. The kids, the subs played in the fourth. The switch everything, all the wings were out there, and that was great for them.
And no Randall, because
yep.
It's a game he hurt his ankle.
Yep. And then comes the big shebang. I will remember that specifically the first quarter between him and Donovan Mitchell, because Donovan came out and Donovan was like, I'm dropping a very big number on you guys tonight. You best get out of the way. He had that look. The shots were falling, everything. And Brunson took it and was like, oh yeah? That's what you want to do? I got one better for you. Goes for 48 points on 32 shots. Ends up being a kind of a runaway Knicks win. I mean, it was a close game, but they ended up winning by 14. That was so cool to watch that game. It was so cool to watch it.
It planted the final seed of we could beat this team, and especially it was now headed toward a 4-5. And look, I was never part of the we could win without Julius crowd, but I thought when Julius hurt his ankle that it was just going to be nice to get into the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens. And then they go up to Cleveland and he does this. You mentioned the first quarter, 47-42 at the end of the first quarter. The Cavs are winning. Mitchell
Insane.
has 23. Brunson has 21 at the end of the first quarter. I believe they're both in the 30s at halftime. Like you said, Brunson finishes with 48 points on 7 or 12 from 3. This became what we saw a lot down the stretch this season, this most recent season. But like 48 points on 32 shots is a very good ratio still. And teams not being able to really stop him and him being able to draw the gravity. There's also still 9 assists in this game. So yeah, this was the moment, especially coming off of the Miami game.
This was the moment.
There was a hint of like, do we need Jalen Brunson? Look how much better the defense was. Like, no, this is the guy.
With all due respect to the other big scoring games he had earlier in this season, this was the first one where it was like, whoa, I'm not sure we knew this was in there. And then it came out and it set everything up for what was to come, including the playoffs. So first round series against Cleveland, 5-game win or 5-game series win. It feels like there should be a game from this series that goes in. I don't.
There's one game in my mind if you're going to pick a game from this series.
I am. Well, which game do you think? I'm going to guess you're going to say definitely game 3 or game 4. I'm guessing you're going to say game 4.
Easily game 4.
So he has
Outplayed
29
Donovan
points.
Mitchell in the fourth quarter of that game.
What'd you say? So
outplayed Donovan Mitchell in the fourth quarter of that game.
29, 6 and 6, makes 5 of 9 from deep, 11 of 22, plays 43 minutes, which is frankly a quaint number now in retrospect. And the Knicks win by 9, 102-93 to go up 3-1. Felt like this. I mean, it didn't feel like the series ended, but up 3-1, and they brought it home in Game 5. So you think that's a green?
That for me is a green.
That's a green for you.
Yeah. He had also been struggling with a shot for most of the series. That's the series. That's the game he hit a bunch of threes.
I think he had he had 11 in the first, and I want to say he had 10 in the fourth. And I'm going to double check that right now.
Yeah.
3,
8 or 10.
4, 5, 6, 8. Yeah, he had 8.
Yeah, he had 8. Yeah. I think after that game, I thought the series was over personally. And it was like the Cavs are going to have to show me that's something they haven't shown all series. And it's something you can't quantify, So I go to Game 1. That's a Josh Hart game. Game 3 is a Madison Square Garden game.
Yep.
And if you're going to pick a Brunson game, it's Game 3. And then by Game 4, it was just like the Knicks are going to win this series.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. The Heat series. Again, we don't have to go through all of it. We kind of know how it went. I don't think they both should go in. I think either Game 6 or Game 5 or Game 6 should go in.
Can we yellow both?
I think for him to end a playoff series against Miami, putting up 38 and 41, including, and here's why I think it's actually, for me, it should pretty easily. I know he scored a little bit more in Game 6, and he was the only player who showed up, at least scoring wise, but played 48 minutes in Game 5, and they won the game.
Look, if you want to green that one, I'm okay. I think there is something about Game 6.
It was also my birthday.
Oh, that's true. That was your birthday, and I think actually you liked your birthday in those moments for a second. Like it was like, oh wow, the Knicks won on my birthday, and it was a Jalen Brunson game, and then we all partied on the post game afterwards. We could green Game 5.
Let's green Game 5. So I feel pretty good about this. We ended up with 3 games from his first season, which gives us a pretty long runway for this past season, which is where a lot of our card stock is going to be cut from. Let's start. Hold on, I'm just pulling up the actual schedule in addition to his game log. Okay. First game that we should consider. I mean, look, if we go through every 30-point game, we're going to be here all night. I would say, do we want to take a look at the 45-point game in the loss at Milwaukee?
That is it's a great Brunson game. You and I both remember that was a Julius Randle game.
Oh, the jumping off of roofs that was taking place amongst Knicks faithful 6 games into Julius Randle's 23-24 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Not what you wanted.
The building of the rocket ship that they were wanting to launch him into. In fairness, Julius was awful, and this was coming off a really bad Cavs game and a really bad 6-game start to the season. Like he was off to a bad start, and like you talk to Fred, you talk to anybody around the team, they're like, Julius is just like going through it right now. Like he's not yelling at referees, he's not mentally checked in yet this year. The surgery clearly happened and like pushed back his routine a month, and he's just going through it. And the 6 games in with RJ playing the way he was, it was like, oh, are we seeing a changing of the guard? Which obviously did not happen.
We did not. I will just say, to this day, this is tied for the 4th highest scoring game of Jalen Brunson's career, 5th if you include the postseason.
He went 2 of 8 from 3. He went 2 of 8 from 3 and scored 45 points.
just a wild performance. I'm going to yellow it again. I don't think it's going to wind up going in. But I do want to yellow it because he had 45. I remember that night. I remember it wasn't like an overwhelming scoring performance, but it was really cool in the moment to watch. Okay. And there was also an in-season tournament game. Okay. Then they get back on their winning ways. Brunson is kind of moseying along with a bunch of 20-point affairs, has some 30-pointers and easy wins against the Wizards and Hornets. Nothing really too notable happen. I'm kind of looking to skip ahead to the Phoenix game. Is there anything in that stretch that you see that there's a 42-point game in a win against Detroit that was too close for comfort, where I believe the Pistons almost came back and made that game more interesting than it should have been, if I recall correctly?
It's the only game, and like you said, that was a too close for comfort game.
Yeah, like you don't get credit for making it too close against Detroit. The Phoenix game that's an automatic, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and the thing, and I've mentioned this before, and I will say it again here. Watching, it was in the second half, definitely in the third quarter, like early to mid third quarter. I was watching Booker and KD like surgically pick apart the Knicks defense. And I was like, and the game was close. It was a single digit game. And I was like, there is no chance on earth that they're winning this game, meaning the Knicks. And then Brunson just detonated. And that was that.
So they went into that game 13-9. They hadn't lost a game yet that season to a team under 500 until the game before when they lost to Utah. And that was the game one of a road trip that we were all like, okay, you gotta have to win the Utah game.
That was an annoying loss.
Because what happens after the Utah game is at Phoenix, at the Clippers, at the Lakers. And so losing the Utah game made us all think that this could be the trip back to the play-in. And like you said, like the first half, it looked like it was headed that direction. And I think I texted our group chat with Fred and Benji at a certain point, and obviously Benji didn't respond because this is a Friday night game. At a certain point in the fourth quarter, like, has he missed this half? And then MSG puts up the stat as like 12 of 12 from the field so far, like 4 threes, 8 shots. It's like, oh my gosh, he's on it. This is historic what he's doing. And it's about picking apart a defense. There was no answer for him in the second half and his first 50-point game.
It was one of the most stunning things I've ever seen in the second half of that game. I still can't frankly believe that it happened, but it becomes a lot more believable given everything else he's done.
In fact, I'll give you the full, exactly 12 of 12, 8 of 8 from 3, and then 35 points in the second half. That's all his second half numbers. 35 points on 12 shots, 8 of 8 from 3. And he ended up missing 2 free throws. So it could have been a 52-point game, but he missed 2 free throws.
Yeah, and 9 assists to boot. Okay. So between that and the Anunoby trade, there is 2 more big scoring games, both against the Bucks, the back-to-back, the first of which came the day before Christmas Eve, the next of which came on Christmas. I feel like a Bucks game has to be in here. There's another Bucks game coming at the end of the year that I know you remember very well. That was I think probably a bigger win. This was on Christmas, though. He had 38 points at the Garden, the only Garden, on Christmas against the Bucks, a team that had their number. Should we yellow it?
It's a yellow for me, because if you want to put a Bucks game on,
yellow, by the way.
Look, there's by now it's a trend, like now it's not just a fluke. Once you get to the Christmas Day game where you've now had 72 hours to prepare for the guy a second time and he's still cooking you, and you're not. Look, who's the head coach of this game?
Was it still
Griffin? And he, in 3 games, is still playing Jalen Brunson in drop. I know my friends over at the Eurostep pod were like, we're just going to let him walk into every mid-range and he's going to hit every mid-range. And that's just apparently the plan.
And like, obviously Brunson was by far their leading scorer in that game. That felt like a team win. Like Quickly had 20 on 10 shots. Randall had a decent game. Barrett had a very good game. Like a lot of guys played well in that game. Josh Hart did a bunch of Josh Hart stuff. Okay, so let's yellow that. Probably not going in. Then the Anunoby trade happens. Brunson doesn't play particularly. I mean, not that he doesn't play well, but he doesn't do anything crazy early on after the OG trade. Misses 2 games against the Grizzlies and the Magic. Comes back. Has a normal game against Houston. Puts up 41 against the Wizards in a game that the Wizards almost came back, and that was the one I almost had a heart attack, right?
The Pistons game later on.
No, I think I almost had a heart attack for the Wizards game too. Maybe I wasn't on playback.
This wasn't
but
a playback game for you. So, okay, this is going to sound obscure, but to the people that were watching, you know what I'm talking about. The entire game, well, it was Benji, XJ, and at Mensah on playback. And the entire game, Mensah, who has been like a Jordan Poole, not Stan, because Stan is too strong a word, but like, he's been a proponent of a defender of Jordan Poole, being like, this guy did win a title. He was an important piece of that team that won a title.
Yeah,
I think he's in a bad situation. I do think they're still a good basketball player. And throughout the night, he'd make a turnover, but then have a good play. It's like, hey, see, that good player's still there. Down the stretch when the Wizards are trying to come back.
I remember this.
I
remember watching you guys on this.
I think Kuzma hits a layup, right? And falls to the ground. And so they're trying to come back, so they need to play defense. And Jordan Poole rushes over to Kuzma to help him up.
Don't foul. Don't foul.
Look at Bags, man.
3-point game.
Look at Bags.
Got it inbound. To OG, careful.
Poole was helping up his teammate instead of trying to go for a steal.
No way.
Somebody just say Draymond.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
I swear he was helping his teammate from out of bounds. And then instead of trying to go for a steal, and then they inbounded it. He's literally helping his teammates. So instead of them being down one teammate, is 2 down now out of bounds as the Knicks are trying to inbound the ball.
He just doesn't care. I think
Come on, man. He did it. He did it.
Dude, he did. I swear.
That was the end of any defense of Jordan Poole from one Mensah Smith, and it led to a very funny moment on playback.
I was watching live. I remember that. That's why I thought I was doing playback, because I was watching you guys. This was, by the way, the start of a 9-game winning streak. The Toronto game, the RJ and Quickly return game happens in here. Brunson has 38, but again, that was not his game. That was their game.
I would argue there's an argument for yellow here, but I understand if you wanted to.
The Raps game, really?
That night was an emotional one.
Yeah.
What I left that game thinking was, damn, we don't have IQ and RJ, but man, we have Jalen Brunson. Like, that was it doesn't stand out in the conscience
I'll
of the season, but it's a yellow for Brunson moments, at least. Again, it wasn't a close game. Like, there was a bad team, but he was part of the reason they ran away with it in the second half.
But again, it just goes to show like the difference from year 1 to year 2. Year 1, it was like, oh man, Brunson had 38. And then by year 2, it's like, it's a 38-point game. It's no big deal. Like, that's.
By the way, did we forget one before the Anunoby trade? The Black Friday game. Well, the Black Friday game against the Heat. Brunson hit some big shots in that fourth quarter. That comeback win against the Heat.
Oh, I remember that as a Quickly game.
I do too, but like Brunson hit the big shots, got the post-game interview on ESPN. And 3/4 of that game sucked. So I'm okay ignoring it. I'm just saying,
I'm
didn't we forget one?
Moving on. It's good that you mentioned it. Let's move on. And with all due respect to the next bunch of games in this streak, including the January 27th game that will live on in infamy for a very long time, I think we skip ahead to the Indiana game.
Yeah.
So February 1st. This is the signature Jalen Brunson game through 2 years. I think it has to be.
signature Jalen Brunson moment.
Fine. Signature Jalen Brunson moment. That's fine.
Yeah. That was bigger than just he had a good game and the Knicks won. Because the post-game interview with him breaking down in tears and
with me breaking down in tears right there with him.
Well, look, all of us, right?
Yeah,
this became more than just a basketball player that plays for a team beloved by fans. Here's my take. I think he became the captain of the Knicks that night and the captain of this fan base too. You know,
I hear the Breen call, born to play basketball, and I still tear up like slightly. It's the craziest thing in the world. Very silly for grown men to be doing this stuff. And yet that's the meaning that game had. So they win that, lose to the Lakers, extending the KFS game watch curse for another game. And then win against the Grizzlies in a game that is certainly not going into the Hall of Fame because
he got hurt.
I was about to say, he had to check back in because the Grizzlies were making a comeback. Not only did it not work, not only did it not stem the tide, but he got hurt and he missed the next game against the Mavs, which they got killed. Not killed. They actually played well in that game. They hung around longer than they should have, and that was a game I believe they didn't have anybody for because it was the day they made the Grimes trade.
Mm-hmm.
Comes back. They lose 3 more in a row. Against the Pacers, I think they still didn't have any players, or they were missing a bunch of players against the Pacers.
So the Pacers is when they had everybody, but we were enlightened to what it's like to play 2 Pistons on your contending team all of a sudden.
They had everybody?
They had everybody. Now, double check. Hartenstein may not have... No, Hartenstein did play that game, I think.
I mean, Brunson, I'm looking at it. Brunson had 39.
Yeah. They were largely down double figures in the second half because their bench couldn't guard anybody.
Okay.
So the only person they didn't have was Hartenstein. But
that's...
It's significant.
Okay. Listen,
geez.
Taj
Tibbs, what are we doing?
Gibson started the game.
Precious
Achua started the game. We forgot that.
Tibbs, what are we doing? Poor Taj Gibson. Oh, no. Okay, so Randall and Hartenstein didn't play this game. So there is obviously Anunoby. But we did have the first 2 bodies that we thought were going to help in Burks and Bogey.
Yes. Burks actually had 22.
Largely in garbage time when they were down 20. The Alec Burks special. Make a 25-point game a 15-point game.
Brunson at 39. It's not going in. The loss to Houston with that crazy nonsense foul at the end. Lost to Orlando, that was the last game for the All-Star game where they really had no players. I forget who else. Was that the only game Josh Hart sat all year?
No, DiVincenzo got hurt against Houston in the fourth quarter.
Yes, that's right.
And then that was Valentine's Day, the Orlando game. And Brunson had a great game. They just didn't have basketball players or NBA players. And Tibbs did the unthinkable and sat him for most of the fourth quarter.
First game out of the All-Star break. Nice win in Philly. I don't even think he got my 3 stars for that game, but I remember that as the bogey game because it was the first big bogey moment. He had that scoring barrage, and it kind of gave them separation. Philly almost came back. Not a great Brunson game. Lost to Boston. I remember that game well. The barely win against Detroit with the foul that wasn't called at the end. Brunson then misses the Pelicans game. They lose that. Plays against the Warriors where did they score 2 points in 7 or 8 minutes to start that game?
It was a rough start to the game. So Fred credits this as the beginning of the end of Precious at the 4. And it was the moment that we all saw, this isn't working anymore. And they still made it a 4-point game in the fourth quarter because that's what this team does. But that was teams that figured out just don't guard him. And the Knicks just won't have any space to do anything else. But to your point, got off to that dreadful start to the game. It was 16-2. And then, the next couple of games. Well, really the next game happens and this team became more than just a basketball team we root for.
Yes. Then they reach cult status the next game when Brunson plays 47 seconds and they still beat Cleveland in Cleveland. lose the next game against the Hawks. But from that point forward, it's mostly smooth sailing with, of course, one inexplicable home loss to a Sixers team that had nobody because what? We attended it as KFS.
That was our fault. Not the Precious at the 4 line, which this was the last time it started.
That was the last time it started.
This was our fault.
So he drops back-to-back 40-point games, 45 at Portland in what was just an utter laugher. And then 42 at the Kings. Now, the Kings game is notable. That's the game we discovered that Julius Randle would not be playing basketball again for the Knicks during the season. I got to tell you, it's
the next Kings game. It's because that was the home game Kings game that it happened. This is the road Saturday night game.
Oh,
yeah.
You're right. Okay. So, and the next Kings game, he had 35. Which of these is the bigger Kings game for you?
The bigger Brunson game is the road Kings game. And I remember it well because I was doing West Coast games and XJ and I did this one. And our biggest takeaway was the last 5 minutes of defense that they played, in that Anunoby and Josh Hart and Hartenstein had Sabonis in jail. And we were like, oh, this was awesome. And then just correctly so, you and Benji and Fred were like, you guys opened with the defense? Brunson had 42 points on 28 shots. Like, oh yeah, we probably should have opened with Jalen Brunson having a second straight 40-point game.
Hold on. This was, if I recall correctly, this was the Keon Ellis game where he left Keon Ellis.
This is a yellow for me. This is a yellow for me.
I think it might be the strongest yellow yet. I'm just going to write Kings, Keon Ellis, 42. That's a very strong yellow. Okay. Continuing along, beat Golden State. Nothing terribly notable. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here to another. It's an auto green. Obviously, if we put, it's a loss, but it's a 61-point loss. Not a 61-point loss.
It is a 61-point loss. It's a loss that they had when he had 61 points. Look, the only reason the Knicks didn't win this game is because an alien showed up. It's really the only reason that the Spurs won. And it's now the Christmas Day game next year.
Yes,
the Knicks and Wemby at the Garden,
as it should be. Okay. The moments from that game down the stretch where just all 4 Knicks would like congregate by the bench and it would just be Jalen Brunson going one-on-one on the other side of the floor. I mean, it was comical what he did. Okay, the other Kings game, like we talked about. I mean, that was symbolic again because they found out about Julius, but. And again, I mean, look, he had 35 in that game. Like it was a big 35 on 20 shots.
Can I tell you why it's a yellow?
Why?
So Josh Hart's box score that game, I believe, was something like, I don't know if he had a triple double, but it was something absurd where he had 20 plus points as well. In fact, I'll pull it up. Josh Hart had, oh yeah, that's right. He had 31, 9, and 8 this game on 19 shots. This was the game that Mike Brown had a game plan of, we're just going to double Brunson. And if you find other offense, fine. And the Knicks had clearly game planned, or, all right, well, this is what we're going to do if they double him.
That's also notable.
So that's what I'm saying is that's when I realized, oh, even if you double him, we got you. Like, even if you double him, we're going to go 4-on-3 with Hartenstein in the short roll or Josh Hart in the short roll. And we're just going to have options for days. And it, like you said, the emotions of losing Julius are part of the story. So it might be a Julius game technically, but the Brunson of it all was a schematic thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily warranted a yellow, but there is a Brunson element that's significant.
I'll yellow it for now. Okay, they end the season on a 5-game winning streak. Here are the wins, and I'm going to say Brunson's point totals: 43 win against the Bucks in Milwaukee. 45 in a win against the Bulls in Chicago. 39 in a win against Boston in Boston, in which the Celtics allegedly didn't care, but you could have fooled me for half at least. 30 points in a 4-point win against the Brooklyn Nets. That was not actually a very good game from him. That was a game watch, right?
Good second half.
Good second half.
No. The game watch was earlier in March.
It was earlier in March.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
This is the second. This is the last Friday night Knicks game. Hartenstein didn't play
Why
because
can't
it
I
was a
picture this
back-to-back.
game?
This was the game they were down in the first half, and then they came back in the second.
That's right.
And Cam Thomas hit a bunch of big shots.
That's right,
And then
yep.
Anunoby got in his face at the end of the game. Mitch had a big fourth quarter. Yeah. Not a Brunson game. Not a Brunson game.
And then last game of the season, 40 points and a 1-point win against the Bulls.
Not a Brunson game. He had 40, but he needed overtime. And
I mean, it was just a sloppy game.
This was again, if you're going to highlight this for a list, it would have been to celebrate the season, the accomplishment of getting the 2 seed. He clinched first team All NBA like weeks earlier. So there was nothing Brunson clinched here. I do think both the Milwaukee and the Boston game could be considered, but the Boston game, again, the narrative was that the Celtics didn't try.
The Bulls game, he had 45 on 24 shots. He went 7 of 12 from deep. Perfect 12 of 12 from the line. 8 assists.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous stat line. You think the Boston game?
Well, just from meaningfulness, like I remember how good he was in that Chicago game, but to speak to the greatness of Jalen Brunson,
man,
that's kind of ho-hum. That was a Bulls team that was fighting for the play-in.
I know the Bulls stunk,
and they did just beat us. So it's not like that was a very weird schedule that the Knicks played. They played the Bulls 3 times in 10 days, so this was the second time.
Yeah, man, you know what? I'm gonna yellow I'm gonna yellow. How about this? I'm gonna jointly yellow Bulls, Bucks, and the Celtics. It may be moot because we're gonna go on to the playoffs. So I think we could skip the first 3 games of the Philly series.
Yes.
First 2 because he didn't play well. The third one, he played had 39, but they lost, and that was the Embiid game.
I gotta be honest, you could tell me he played well. I think of 2 things from that game. One was the way the Sixers picked on him on defense, especially in that third quarter.
Yeah.
And the rage I felt after the game for a human that plays for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay. So we have some automatic ins here. 47 Knick playoff record in the Game 4 win in Philadelphia. I mean, the greenest of greens, to borrow a popular term. If
the Indiana game, the Born to Play basketball game, is the high water mark, the climax of his regular season Knicks tenure so far, this is his climax of the playoff tenure so far.
Had 40 the next night, but that will be remembered more for Tyrese Maxey's exploits at the end of regulation. And then Game 6 happens. And Brunson's stat line in that game, series clinching win, 41 points on 13 of 27 from the field. Got to the line 16 times, made 12. Dished 12 assists, had 2 turnovers. And the Knicks won by 3.
It's yellow. I don't know if it's necessarily green for being a Brunson moment, but 41 points in a series clinching win.
A series clincher.
What do you remember about that game?
Well, I remember the Hart game winner.
It's a Josh Hart game, unfortunately. So the Brunson aspect of this, I don't know if you'll agree. For 5 games, we're complaining about Embiid foul baiting. And I had gotten to a point of like, you know what, as long as they're calling it both ways, I don't care. And there was a stretch where it's like, you go down one end and Embiid either foul baits to get to the line or like makes a shot because they're afraid to guard him. And it's like, all right, you're unguardable. And then you come back down the other end and Brunson does the exact same thing. Either foul baits to get to the line or they're afraid to guard him and he makes a shot. And that was my takeaway of that second half. I was like, oh, this being afraid of Joel Embiid is pointless. We have Jalen Brunson. Like we have an alpha that matches this.
I'm looking at all these yellows that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of solid games. 41 in a game in a series clinching win.
Green.
Come on. It's
Green.
Put it in.
I'm in.
Okay. So game 6 versus Philly is in. Now game 1 against Indiana was his 4th consecutive 40-point playoff game. I say it out loud. I know I witnessed it, and yet it doesn't even seem real. 43 he had on 26 shots, made only 1 3-pointer in this game. Perfect from the line, 14 of 14. 6 assists, 6 rebounds. I mean, they got a little assistance to win this game from the refs at the end.
I know what you're talking about.
Of course you don't. I got it. I think this has to go in.
I would yellow it for now because the next game is significantly more Jalen Brunson moment
Game
for me.
2 against Indiana.
When he gets hurt, and then he will on the anniversary of Willis Reed walking out of the tunnel. He walks out of the tunnel at halftime and wills them to
Puts
victory.
them on their back. Puts them on his back. Okay, so that's how we're going to do this. I can't believe we don't have room for 41 or 43, excuse me, to open game 1. But you're right. It has to be game 2 because of that. And because it was the most heroic thing that I think we feel like we had ever seen. And I'm going to make this. How many of those points were in the second half? Was it 25?
I will double check. He had 29 for the game and finished in the second half of that game. Jalen Brunson had
24, 25, something like that.
Yeah. Hold on a second. In the second half of that game, Jalen Brunson had 24 points on 16 shots on what clearly looks like it was 1 foot.
Yeah.
Because he was a step slow the rest of the series.
We're going to end this right now because despite being a step slow for the rest of the series, somehow, some way, I still don't know how he did it. And I was in the building, so I know it wasn't a produced television special made for my entertainment. Came out and in the first half specifically against Indiana in game 5, and I know that game will be remembered for all the Isaiah Hartenstein rebounds. I know it will be remembered for the defense they played. I know it will be remembered for the rabid Garden crowd. I know all those things. The scoring performance that Jalen Brunson put on in the first half, coming off of an ass whooping, 32-point demolition at the hands of the Indiana Pacers to tie the series up at 2-2. It was the most impressive thing I have ever seen in person at a basketball game or at a sporting event, actually, really.
28 points on 18 shots to what John's speaking about. Yeah.
Insane. So that's 10.
Really?
That's 10. I'm going to go through them right now. So we have first 48 points versus the Cleveland Cavaliers late in the 22-23 season. 40. Why did I write 48 again? How many points did he have in game 4 versus Cleveland? 29?
He had 29 in that game. Yeah.
29 versus the Cavs in game 4 win at the Garden. 38 points versus Miami in a game 5 win at the Garden. Jumping forward to this season. 50 versus Phoenix Suns. Next up, the win against the Indiana Pacers, in which came on the night that he was named an All-Star for the first time. He had 40 points in that game. Number 6, 61 versus the San Antonio Spurs. And then number 7, game 4 against the Sixers, had 47 points. Number 8, game 6 against the Philadelphia 76ers, had 41. And then game 2 and game 5 against Indiana at 29 and 44, respectively. That, through 2 years, is your Jalen Brunson Hall of Fame.
Can I make a case for a loss, but I don't know what to replace it with? Like what to take off the list as a result?
What?
So, as you know, John, especially if you look over my right shoulder, I'm a big fan of Carmelo Anthony. And when Brunson got here, I was like, I'm enjoying it. This is great. He's awesome. There was a push that like, oh, he's already better than Melo. He's greater than Melo. And I considered that nonsense for the majority of it because like, can this guy make an all-star team first? Can he finish top 5 in MVP ever? before we have this conversation. And then game 6 against Miami was the first time that I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe he can like supersede this. And obviously this past season put him in the Ewing conversation. But like I always defend I will just a self-proclaimed Melo stan. I always defend like that Pacers series that he just got like no help. J.R. Smith was in his own head. Tyson Chandler was getting body bagged by Roy Hibbert. Amari was largely, he was either non-existent or didn't play in that series. I forget. And he just
didn't matter.
Right. So he didn't help. I was like opining for Chris Copeland because I thought he like was a better option. And Jason Kidd just forgot how to hit jump shots at that point in his career, which is why that was the last series that he ever played. And then game 6 in Indiana, you needed Melo to have a Herculean effort. And all people remember is that block. And game 6 in Miami, if a second person other than Scott Foster shows up to help Jalen Brunson that night, they're playing game 7.
Josh Hart had 11 points on 5 of 10 shooting.
11 points on 10 shots is the second best performance of the night.
So to your point, and this is not, I swear I'm not making this up. The rest of the starting lineup combined went 4. I'm going to say this out loud. 4 for 32 from the field.
Mitch didn't hit a shot. Grimes didn't hit a shot.
No,
Randall.
Mitch was 0 for 2. Grimes was
1
1
What did RJ
for,
do this game?
I'll get there.
Okay.
Mitch 0 for 2. Grimes 1 for 6. All 6 attempts were from deep. RJ 1 for 10. And Julius Randle 3 for 14.
Isn't that 5 for 32?
Sorry, I miscounted. 5 for 30.
Okay. Because I knew about the Randall 3 for 14 and the RJ 1 for 10, which is why I was like, I guess nobody else made a shot. Point being, I left this game being like, man, he actually is. If they could put a squad around him the way I always wanted them to put a squad around Melo, maybe this can be special. And what he proved the following season is that there's a level he can ascend to that Melo never did. And especially from an efficiency standpoint, from the way defenses, really, this is what the biggest knock I'll put on Melo. The way he'll buy into team ball, like the way Brunson can find cutters is just something Melo wasn't able to do in a different time in the NBA.
It's funny.
The point is, like, that's why that game 6 actually stands out to me. That game 5 is the strongest of greens. You're right. It was your birthday. It was
it's nothing to do with
it. Is stays off elimination, like that. 48 minutes, continuing the series.
The 48 minutes, the not sitting down, stands out incredibly because specifically another thing to praise him for the game 6 performance was he did sit in game 6 for 2 minutes and 50 seconds and they were outscored by 7 points in those 2 minutes and 50 seconds. A game they lost by 4. The reason I was jumping in when you're saying finding cutters is because the one big knock on game 6 is he tried to find a cutting Julius Randle. It didn't go so well. And and like he owns that. He'll always own that. And like him and Josh Hart have talked about that game on the Roommates pod and about how that series loss hurts a lot more than the Pacers series loss because they felt they should have beat Miami and they just had no bodies against Indiana. It's
the only game that I would make a case for.
Well, here's what
could potentially be there.
Okay. Everything. The only game that I think you have a case to replace it with, ironically enough, is another game 6 where he scored 41 points. Except in that one, they won against Philadelphia 76ers.
The problem is they're sisters, like they're married to each other. Which is not what sisters are, but
that was great.
They are spiritually attached, those 2 games, because like you said, he was trying to find a cutting Julius Randle in the Miami game and Josh Hart was wide open and Josh joked about it. Like I was wide open.
Yeah.
And then what does he do in this game?
Found him in the other game. Yeah.
Finds Josh Hart a year later for the game winning and series clinching 3. So that's why if you're you can't replace one for the other. Is either you have both or you have the Philly game, in my opinion.
I think in putting in the Philly game, you are honoring the Miami game because of what you just said.
Is there a world where Game 4 against Cleveland is not on this list?
I think
where that's a team win. That was largely an RJ game.
I think there has to be a representative from that series.
Okay,
there just has to be. It was their first series win in a decade, and he was unequivocally. Well, I was going to say
he was unequivocally the best player.
He wasn't unequivocally the best player. Mitchell Robinson was the best player in the series, but he was the guy. He was doing the heavy lifting, and they needed him, and they weren't winning that series without him. Especially with Randall. Again, that was not a good Randall series. So
yeah.
If you would have told any Knicks fan, like, hey, you're going to face a team before the season, if you would have told a Knicks fan, you're going to face a team in the first round of the playoffs that finished with the second best net rating in the league, and they're going to have Donovan Mitchell, and you don't, and you're going to be not without Julius Randle, but you give the person Julius Randle's stat line for the series, you show it to them ahead of time, and you say, but you won that series. Like, they were like, how did that happen? And it's Jalen Brunson. You have to honor Jalen for that.
Okay, then that's our Hall of Fame.
I feel really good about this.
Read it one more time for the people listening.
Okay, one more time. I'll go through it real quick. 48 versus the Cavs. Game 4 versus the Cavs. Game 5 versus the Heat. 50 versus the Suns. All-Star selection night against Indiana. 61 versus the Spurs. Game 4 versus Philly, Game 6 versus Philly, Game 2 versus Indiana, Game 5 versus Indiana.
So 6 playoff games.
I mean, they count more.
I love it. We have a playoff hero on our team.
We do have a playoff hero on our team. He's also the captain of our team. And cool ceremony today. I thought...
Well, last Thursday.
Cool ceremony last Thursday. And I'm trying to think if there's anything I wanted to say specifically from because I was actually like taking notes during it. There was a couple good things, but nothing really worth saying. Okay, this was great. I had fun doing this.
Me too. I will enjoy. As much as I enjoy doing this, I'll have even more fun watching Jalen Brunson for the rest of his career in a Knicks uniform.
That will be fun. Are we doing more Hall of Fames this summer?
I would love to. I believe I pitched this as our evergreen idea for the off season, that we'll do a Brunson Hall of Fame, then we go to a Randall Hall of Fame, and we could do a Josh Hart one. Mitch has been here for 7 years, so maybe there is a Mitchell Robinson Hall of Fame.
I propose, and I swear this is not because I think Julius Randle might not be here next summer. Or Mitchell Robinson for that matter. I think Julius and Mitch, because they are by far two longest tenured Knicks on the team still, I think those are the other two that we should do this summer. I think both will be very challenging for different reasons.
I agree. Now, here's the one I'm interested in that I'm going to propose, and I wonder if you can contain yourself. Is there a Tibbs Hall of Fame episode?
Do it next season.
After he's fired?
That's very funny. The funny thing is, like, again, probably says a lot about me and how I intake the sport of basketball. I can't think of a single game where I'm like, oh, that was a Tibbs win.
The Cavs game from this past season.
Oh, but but again, if it's a Tibbs, anything by definition, if a game goes down as a Tibbs win, right? It is because, in theory, it goes down as a Tibbs win because he put players in positions to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm going to remember the game for what those players did. That granted, he put them in the position. Like, for instance, I'll give you a great example. What was it, game 5 or was it game 4 against Cleveland last season where he stuck with Obi?
That's game 4. That was game 4.
Okay, so you could be like, well, Tibbs, great move. Finally,
That would be my Tibbs playoff win. That's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I look at it more as like, great job, Obi Toppin. You got put in a situation to produce, and you produced. It would be very difficult for me to do that sort of thing, because I just think now I'm going to really sound like a shill. He coaches the same way every game. Nothing's different. He doesn't have, like, sometimes things work out in his favor. Sometimes things don't work out in his favor, you know?
And I think there are very clear games where he sticks with some things that aren't working too long, and then doesn't go to things that we've seen work in the past that he could try. And then there is a lot of games really from this season and the We Here season in particular. And this is where I think is the ethos of the Tibbs Hall of Fame. I go into the game and be like, we have no chance tonight. And somehow, despite the talent discrepancy and this, Simmons put it perfectly during the playoffs. The Knicks don't win because they're better. They try harder, you know?
Well,
and that, I think, is the ethos of a Tibbs team, especially after all of the years of watching teams not try harder. And now we have a set of players that's bought into. Now, look, it's on the players to buy in to said ethos, but that's why a Tibbs Hall of Fame would be interesting.
I would add, in addition to they try harder, and the real thing is they are better prepared than any other team in the league. And the thing I will say about the coaching bit is, I'm thinking if I should make an analogy to like a movie director, but there are auteurs who very much have their own style. What I was going to say is, one sign it could be said that one sign of a great director is you don't think about like what is happening behind the scenes. It's just you're enjoying a great movie, right? I think the same thing could be said about a great coach, which is that if you don't notice anything going on and you don't notice anything they're doing, they're probably doing a very good job. You know, because they don't let run get out of control by the other team, or like, you know, things of they don't keep a player on the floor for too long. And like, yeah, a lot of times that shit happens with Tibbs. It's like, why isn't Tibbs doing something? And those are obviously not games that would go in the Tibbs Hall of Fame, but there are so many other games where just the Knicks go out and they win what seems like a ho-hum game, and Tibbs doesn't seem like he does anything, you know, notable. And yet, the reason they kicked the crap out of Team X or Team Y or Team Z is because they were so prepared going into that night. Now, was that a Tibbs win? You could say it, even if he may not have made a lineup decision in the moment to have like secured the win. So I would, again, personally,
I don't think you could do it.
I would have a very difficult time doing it. I just don't know that I have anything to offer. I could do
every win is
Mitch,
a Tibbs win. Every win that the Knicks have had in the last 4 years is a Tibbs win. Every loss they've had is also a Tibbs win, but a player loss.
Coaches don't win or lose games. They put players in positions,
and that's where we've always disagreed. But we're way too far into the pod. I very much thought the coach of Team USA was well on his way to losing their silver medal game, and then they decided to stop calling plays and be better than the other team in the fourth quarter.
Listen, that was I don't know.
And this is airing after the gold medal game, so who knows what happens? But we're recording this hours after I watched a hockey shift change in the third quarter that turned a US 5-point deficit into a 15-point deficit going into the fourth, and
not because I have any love lost for Jason Tatum, but I'm just very happy that they won that game, in large part because I had no interest in that discourse taking place over the next. I don't know how long it would have taken place. Listen, they might. For all we know, again, we're talking about something that happened in the past tense. They could lose on Saturday. And
listen, I will wait to edit this until after the gold medal game to see if all of this aged and Tatum played and he went.
You should leave it all in regardless. Leave it all in regardless. We are going to go. Thank you, Andrew Claudio, for doing a solid by recording early so I can go and enjoy a little R&R. We will be back with another episode next week. I think with Jeremy.
No,
Jeremy's still away.
actually, I see what you're saying. Next week, it's Thursday, so I'm thinking next week is okay. Maybe he might be part of the Randall Hall of Fame episode. I personally would like to get the detail junkie and the defender of Julius on with us for that.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, DJ Zulo is doing the Lord's work defending one Julius Randle and has done so. So I will reach out to him and see if he can.
Listen, man.
And if he can't, maybe we just wait until he's available so that we can do it.
And the Randall Hall of Fame is going to take some prep work because we just we could skim through the last 2 seasons of Brunson pretty quickly and do this in a not terribly long amount of time. Julius Randle's been here for 5 years.
Yeah. True. Can I be honest with you? I don't have a single game from the pre-pandemic season. I'll just throw that out there now. It starts we here.
The over-under on games from that season
is 0.5, John.
It's
0.5.
Frankly, from the 21-22 season.
The thumbs down season? Yeah.
The thumbs down season. The over-under, I would actually put the over-under for combined games from those 2 seasons. It's either 0.5 or 1.5. I think there was at least a game from the 21-22 season that should be considered.
He scored 46 against the Kings one game in the thumbs down season.
I vaguely remember
And then
that.
there's the win against, I think it was the Heat. It was a Sunday game. It was the first game after his grandma had died in the 1920 season.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 games from either season that I personally, without research, would consider. But we got a week and a half, so maybe that'll help.
Okay. This was great. Thanks everybody for listening. Couple shameless plugs before we go. If you dig what we do on the Knicks Film School podcast and you want to hear more of my inane thoughts about this team and the game of basketball, feel free to subscribe to the Knicks Film School newsletter. Still pumping out 3 newsletters a week through the rest of the summer. I'm going to bump that back up to the usual 5 newsletters a week, sometime probably late September. When training camp is around the corner. But in the meantime, I've been doing a lot of fun newsletters, got some fun what ifs coming up. I had a reader email me, can you write something on what if the Knicks had signed Reggie Miller in free agency in 1996? That was a fun one. And I got an article coming out, I think next week on, might actually even be dropping today when this pod drops on what do I think the Knicks death lineup is. So lots of good stuff coming up in the newsletter. You could find that on Substack. And of course, if you like this podcast, whether you'd like to listen to it or watch it, feel free to subscribe, certainly on wherever you get your podcast, on YouTube, and leave us a 5-star rating, leave a review. Those things help us greatly. That is it for me. Thank you, Andrew Claudio.
Thanks, Jon GMAC, and thank you, Jalen Brunson.
Thank you, Jalen Brunson. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We will be back with more fun and games before you know it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Knicks Film School Podcast. This episode was once again presented by BetUS.